If you're retiring in the next 12 months, what should you do different with your retirement savings? Welcome to Retirement Revealed. I'm your host, Jeremy Keil, and we're here to turn your retirement savings into retirement income. Today, we're talking about what you need to do with your retirement savings when you are retiring in the next year. And this idea, this podcast today was prompted by two data points. I know I love data. The first one is that we do a lot of retirement webinars, and I always see kind of where do people show up, what were they interested in. But one thing that came to my mind is I wonder when they showed up on our webinar and then became a client, what was their connection to their retirement date? Did they go on the webinar 2 years before they retired? Was this 5 years after they retired? Well, it turns out, on average, this is the most recent data. On average, when you showed up to one of my retirement webinars and you asked for more info, you turned on to someone who wanted to work with us to become to plan for your retirement. On average, you showed up to the webinar 3 months after you retired, which was interesting to me. These are retirement planning webinars, and you're showing up afterwards, which is great. Better late than never. But it was interesting that on average, people are showing up to retirement planning webinars after they actually retired. The second data point is that I'm recording this mid-September. The stock market is at an all-time high. It kind of was all-time high in June, dropped, all-time high in July, dropped, all-time high in August, dropped, back it up near the all-time high in September. And I'm not predicting that the market is going to drop, but it reminds me of two people I met back in the fall of 2019 when the stock market was at an all-time high point at that certain point in time. And those are two folks that I took through our 5-step retirement plan. So just to give you something to do, go to 5stepretirementplan.com. I've got information, 5 videos that you can learn the 5 steps I took these folks through. So 5stepretirementplan.com. And the first one, I met with them. He told me, I want to retire next April 1. And then we talked. Turns out he says, I like your planning, but I don't want to start paying you until I retire. I'll call you on April 1. Well, they were true to their word. In early March, they called me. Well, you know what happened in March of 2020? The market had just dropped. It had just dropped by 12% in one day. I found the old email. He said, we need to start planning together ASAP. 6 months earlier, we were talking. He said, I like your planning. I'm just not going to do it yet. So we met. Turns out he got COVID, one of the first people to get COVID. And then he said, well, I can't retire April 1. The market's already down. I'll just retire next April. And then turns out he said, I'm going to retire the next April after that. Well, 4 years later, in the spring of 2024 is when he actually retired. His plan was to retire April 1 of 2020. We met fall of 2019. I said, hey, you're close. You're 6 months away. Let's start doing some planning. He said, I'm going to wait till I hit retirement. Well, it turns out his hitting retirement was 4 years later than he expected. Then just about the same time, had another couple. They reached out to me that same time, September of 2019. What they were telling me is that we want to retire in about 2 years. We're middle of the road risk. Our current advisor is not answering any of our questions about how to get ready for retirement. And I don't think we're middle of the road risk. When I look into it, they were not middle of the road risk. They were high risk. And I said, let's plan this out. Walked it through with them. We took basically half the risk out of the stock market, not because we thought the market was going down. It's just what made sense for them with their planning of here's what you get ready to do when the market drops. Here's what you get ready to do when you're ready to retire in 2 years. I was looking through. I was trying to find some emails and correspondence. I found that the same exact day when the market dropped 12%, this client called me as well and said, oh my goodness, what do I do? Do I need to get out of the stock market? I got to tell him, well, yeah, you already did 6 months earlier because you went through the planning. You were getting close to retirement. And so you set up your investments to match what you're doing with being close to retirement. Give you some aftermath there. They retired exactly on time 2 years later. I just spoke to them a few weeks ago, and they had moved down towards their grandkids down south. So they are enjoying life, and they went through the planning process ahead of time. So I guess a bit of word to the wise is if you are planning on retiring soon, why wait? Don't wait at all. What I've seen happen to more folks, this is a kind of 2020 related, and of course I met them afterwards, but they call me up in June. This is two people from the same company. The reason why is they called me up because the company had just let them go in June of 2020. So I'm talking to each of them, basically had the exact same story. The story was, I was planning on retiring at the end of this year, and I figured I would just ride it out, try to make a little bit more money in the 401k until I retired, and then I'd switch it over to being more safe. Well, the market dropped in March of 2020 by 30% from top to bottom there. They both freaked out, said, oh my goodness, I can't let it go down any further, moved to cash. And then what happens next? The market starts going back up. And then they got let go in June when they were both thinking they could make it through the end of the year. And so moral of the story is if you are planning on retiring in the next 12 months, don't wait until you hit your retirement date. A lot of people I talk to, they feel as if I've got to grow my money until I hit this one exact date, and then I got to switch it over to income. I don't think that's the right approach. You've probably heard this idea of the retirement red zone. Had a recent podcast with David Blanchett where he's talking about the retirement red zone. It's the 10 years leading up to retirement, the 5 years after retirement, where you're kind of at risk of, oh my goodness, the market drops. The market goes up and down every day, but if it happens to drop in that time frame, it could vastly affect your retirement. And so my encouragement is to plan this out ahead of time. Don't be like these other folks that we run into, unfortunately, all too often, that are waiting until they hit retirement to actually plan out their retirement, to actually change their investments around. Another data point that we quote all the time is, on average, you retire earlier than planned. So if you're thinking, I'm going to retire down the road, I'll wait down the road till I get my retirement planning in. I'd say whatever number you want to start your retirement planning, do it 3 years earlier, because on average, you retire 3 years earlier than you expected. You ask a 55-year-old, when do you think you would retire? They'll tell you 65. But you ask a 65-year-old, when did you retire? They'll tell you 62. So if you got to have a number, that's your number. 3 years ahead of time, at least 3 years ahead of time, I think is when you want to start planning for retirement. But definitely with the market at a high point, and if you're planning on retiring in the next year, even 3 years, start planning your retirement. That doesn't mean you have to drop your risk, but it means you ought to start planning for your retirement. You can check out those 5 steps I think you ought to take as you're planning to go through retirement, 5stepretirementplan.com. Let me go through them briefly here. The first one is figure out how much you might spend in retirement. The easiest way to figure that out is to look at your take-home pay. Whatever shows up in your checking account today is probably what you're spending month to month. So that's your spending number, but then you've got to have a length of time. On average, you retire 3 years before you expected. So if you're trying to plan this out in your Excel spreadsheet and you got a number like 65, I'd encourage you to go and change that number to 62. Whatever number of age you think you're going to retire, plan for it 3 years ahead of time. Get ready for it 3 years ahead of time. That's what happens on average. Then there's also an end date to retirement. The best way, I think, for you to find the end date, and of course there's different places to go, but the one I like is longevityillustrator.org, where you can take a look and see what is your life expectancy. So now you've got your spending number, your start date, which is probably earlier than you expected, your end date, which is probably longer than you expected. Now you've got a better realistic picture of what you're likely to spend throughout your retirement. The second step is to figure out what are you going to make in retirement. Just because you stop working doesn't mean you stop making money. You will make money from your Social Security. If there's 2 of you, there might be 2 Social Securities. You might still have a pension, might have an old pension. And take a look at these decisions, one-time decisions on your pension, on your Social Security, and figure out, how do I get the most out of the Social Security? How do I get the most out of the pension? With Social Security, just to give a bit of advice there, if there's 2 of you and you both have Social Security's benefits coming in at some point in time, chances are one's higher, one's lower. If you've got the opportunity to take the higher one, especially if it's the older person with a higher Social Security, and you can wait, that really helps out both you when there's 2 of you, but also especially that widow that's on there. Both of your benefits would grow by 8% a year. But if you've got a small benefit and a big benefit, 8% on a big benefit is a bigger amount. So see what you can do to boost up that higher benefit. The third part is to look at your tax planning, see what can I do to keep more of my money. When you look at your taxes throughout your entire retirement, your taxes are likely to change. It's likely to change before you retire, after you retire, before you go on Social Security, after, before required minimum distributions, after RMDs. If there's two of you, before when you're married filing joint, and after when you're widowed. And look at those points in time to see, when am I likely to have high taxes? When am I likely to have low taxes? If you plan it out to try to pay taxes when it's at a lower rate, that should help you avoid those taxes at a higher rate. Smoothing out your taxes over your lifetime projects out to lowering your taxes over your lifetime, which means you get to keep more of your money. The fourth piece of planning out your retirement, and again, you want to do this well ahead of time. I'm suggesting 3 years ahead of time. Certainly, if you're planning on retiring in the next 12 months, start doing this today, right now, where you still want to grow your money, but part of your money is no longer long-term, it's now short-term. The thing you want to keep in mind is, how much money do I need in the short term? If you need money next month, next year, next couple of years, if that's how you feel, I don't think that money should be in the stock market. It should be in things that are more stable. And so think of what's your short-term money, what's your long-term money. Your long-term money can still grow up and down in the market just like it was before, because that's all future money. But now you've got to decide and think, how much money do I need? Plan it out, project that. That's why we do step one first, of how much do you need in retirement? How much are you planning on spending? If you need $50,000 a year for the next few years, look at how many years that is and say, you know what, the next 2 years, I really want to get that out of the market. Or the next 5 years, I want to get that out of the market. Or one, whatever number that makes you feel comfortable. We like this idea of having short-term income buckets, long-term income buckets, and you don't need to wait until your exact day of your retirement. I'd encourage you, as you approach retirement, if you're 3 years away, 1 year away, especially when the market's at high point, that's when you want to be thinking of, do I take profit out of the market and make sure I have enough in my short-term income bucket so I'm ready to retire when I want to retire. Fifth and final step is figuring out how much you're likely to leave behind. And you can leave behind a legacy. You can also leave behind some bills. We want to make sure you look at all the risks that could hit your retirement. And there's a lot of risks. One risk is you die too soon and you leave your spouse with not enough income for a variety of reasons. Another risk is you live too long and you outlast your money. Or really, the longer you live, the worse your health gets and the higher your healthcare costs become. So planning out what the risks might be to your retirement so that you accidentally leave some bills behind. We want to avoid that. But hopefully everything worked out. And you're not leaving behind any bills. You're just leaving behind a legacy. And that legacy will look a lot better, be a lot easier on your spouse, your kids, your beneficiaries, your charities that you support, if you make it easy on them by having the proper planning, having it easy on them when they inherit your money. So I've got all that put together at the 5stepretirementplan.com. You can use the number 5 or spell it out. You'll get there either way. You can also send me questions. Go to retirement-revealed.com. Type top right-hand corner. You'll see Ask Jeremy a Question. Love to hear from you, see what questions you got on your mind. I'll also put those in the comments on YouTube. But my encouragement from everything I've seen is a lot of people wait until they hit the retirement date to plan their retirement. And in my experience, planning things out ahead of time quite often gets you better results. Thank you for listening to the Retirement Revealed podcast. We believe if you know more about your money, you'll feel better about your money and you will make better money decisions. Hi, I'm Jeremy Keil, owner of Keil Financial Partners. And if you're interested in seeing how we help our clients get more income, pay less in taxes, and avoid big retirement mistakes, make sure to go to keilfp.com. That's KEILFP.com.